They say the suit makes the man. I say it just hides the bruises. Mine was navy, tailored, sharp enough to suggest power, quiet enough to hide the humiliation burning underneath. The room was too bright, too expensive, too fake. One of those Charleston villas where money hangs in the air like pollen. Crystal glasses, jazz trio, waiters gliding around like ghosts in gloves. Rachel's hair was perfect, her laugh delicate, controlled. I stood next to her like an accessory, like a rented tux on a borrowed man. The engagement dinner was for Trevor, her son. Not mine, never mine, but I had paid for the invitation cards, the caterer, the champagne they were sipping like it meant something. Trevor was on his second glass, working the room with the smugness of someone born into comfort. Except he wasn't. He was born into absence, into a hole left by a father who vanished before the boy turned 2. No child support, no birthdays, just a shadow of a man Rachel never spoke of, and a silence that echoed through every part of their lives. I met Rachel when Trevor was 10. Quiet kid, pale, the kind who flinched when you raised your voice. I didn't try to replace anyone. I just showed up, took him to games, sat through school plays, covered doctor visits, summer camps, baseball tryouts. I did what needed doing. Never dad. Just Tom. Always Tom. Rachel used to say, "You're doing too much." He doesn't even say thank you. But I kept going. I believed if I held the foundation long enough, the house would eventually feel like home. I told myself that love wasn't about being seen. It was about showing up, quietly, until someone finally noticed. But there's a sickness that grows in silence. A rot beneath the wallpaper of politeness. You don't see it at first. You feel it in the way they look through you at dinner, in how your name is absent from their milestones. You feel it in the tilt of a head, in the way your stories get cut off halfway through. It starts small, then it spreads. College came, paid, dorm fees, textbooks, flights. The unspoken agreement was always the same. I fund the dream, they forget the hands that made it possible. Then came internships, the figuring it out years. Rent, utilities, car repairs, deposit for a new apartment. I wired the money every time, sometimes before he even asked. Rachel once said, "He takes it for granted." I nodded. Of course he did. That's what happens when love looks like a direct deposit. I should have stopped then. But guilt is a powerful drug. And so is hope. I wore that tux like armor. We were barely an hour into the engagement dinner when the first signs of rot surfaced. Rachel and I were seated near the center table, under a chandelier that probably cost more than our kitchen renovation. Her dress shimmered under the lights, silver, floor length, the kind of thing you wear when you want to remind people you still matter. I sat beside her, smiling on cue, laughing at jokes I didn't understand, fielding questions from Sophie's parents, Trevor's fiancée, about how proud we must be. I nodded, said the right words, played the role. Then Trevor stood up. He clinked a spoon against his glass, charming, rehearsed, and the room hushed. People turned. Phones lifted. The jazz trio went silent. He looked radiant, clean-cut, confident, the kind of son every man dreams of, if he didn't know what it cost to get there. And then he said it. "I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. This means the world to Sophie and me. We feel incredibly blessed." Applause. Nods. The usual. He went on. "There's one person I want to acknowledge. Someone who made all this possible. Not emotionally, of course, he's not really the sentimental type." People chuckled. My smile tightened. Trevor looked directly at me. "Let's raise a glass to Tom, our sponsor. He may not always get what's going on, but he sure knows how to write checks." A wallet in a suit. The room exploded in laughter. Rachel went pale. Someone behind me whispered, "Ouch." I didn't flinch, just raised my glass, nodded, and smiled like a man watching his own funeral from inside the coffin. Trevor sat down, grinning. Rachel leaned toward him. I saw it in the corner of my eye, but said nothing. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the invoice for the tent rental, the last thing I'd covered. Folded once, neatly. I placed it on the table in front of Rachel. Then I stood. I didn't say a word. Didn't make a scene. Just walked through the room like smoke through a crack. Past waiters, past whispers, past faces I didn't recognize and never would again. I left before dessert. 3 weeks. Not a word. No text from Trevor. No call from Rachel. Just silence. Heavy, deliberate, like everyone had agreed to pretend I hadn't walked out of that dinner with a receipt in place of a thank you. Then it came. A message. No greeting. No apology. No acknowledgement of the room full of strangers who'd laughed as I was gutted in a tailored suit. Just this. Hey Tom, we still need $3,700 for the band and photographer. Can you send it over? It read like a grocery list. Like I was a line item in a spreadsheet. Not a man. Not the one who made the whole evening possible. Just the wallet. Still open, still expected to bleed on cue. My thumb hovered over the screen. I reread it twice, thinking maybe there was a second half. Something that hinted at remorse, gratitude, recognition. But no, just the ask. Just the next invoice. And I realized then, they weren't waiting for me to cool off. They were waiting for the next transaction. I didn't reply. Not immediately. Instead, I sat down at the kitchen table, where the afternoon sun cut across the floor like a blade. Rachel was out, her Pilates class, maybe, or coffee with one of the Charleston wives who wore sunglasses indoors and talked about equity portfolios like they understood labor. I opened my laptop, pulled up the wedding spreadsheet. Every line I'd filled in. Every vendor I'd chased. Every zero I'd added to my own debt because it's his big day. Tent rental. Catering. Photographer deposit. Invitation suite. Hotel blocks. Gift bags. Wine. Nearly $28,000. My name was on every payment. No thanks. No mention. I thought of that night again. Trevor's toast, the laughter, the smugness. The way he called me a sponsor, as if my love had terms and conditions. I closed the laptop, picked up my phone, typed slowly, deliberately. No. No explanation. No excuses. Just the one thing I hadn't said in 10 years of compromise. It was like pulling the pin from a grenade. The read receipt came almost instantly. Then nothing. Not for hours. And then the knock. It was Trevor and Sophie, standing on my front porch like missionaries about to offer salvation. Sophie wore a powder blue dress and carried a binder. Trevor held his phone like a weapon. Rachel let them in. They didn't sit. Trevor cleared his throat. We were surprised by your message. Not hurt. Not confused, just surprised, like the vending machine had finally jammed. Rachel leaned against the kitchen island, arms crossed. I couldn't read her face. She looked like she was waiting to see which direction the storm would blow. Sophie stepped forward. The vendor deadlines are tight. We can't lose the band or the photographer, not at this point. I looked at her. That's not my concern anymore. Trevor frowned. You've always come through. I don't understand what changed. He said it like a man confused by his own reflection. Like he couldn't comprehend the idea that the stream had dried up. I stood, walked to the window, looked out at the backyard I'd mowed for 10 years. The shed I'd built. The swing Trevor once used before he got too old, too proud. I turned back. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. What changed? You stood in front of a room full of people and reduced me to a bank account in a blazer. You made me the punchline, and then you had the nerve to ask for more. Trevor opened his mouth, closed it. Rachel finally spoke. They're stressed. It was a joke. I looked at her. You laughed. She didn't answer. I turned back to Trevor. You don't get to spit on a man and ask him to keep carrying your weight. Sophie blinked. But we're counting on you. That broke something. I stepped forward, slow and measured. You don't get to count on someone you don't respect. You don't get to humiliate me in public and then ask for private generosity. Trevor's voice cracked. So what, you're just pulling out? You're abandoning us a month before the wedding? I smiled. No, I'm just stepping back from a role I was never allowed to claim. Rachel's hand covered her mouth. Trevor shook his head, stunned. So all those years meant nothing to you? I laughed. Just once. A sharp breath. No, Trevor. They meant everything. That's why this hurts like hell. But I won't bankroll people who see me as less than. Silence. Not guilt. Not reflection. Just silence. The stunned kind that comes when entitlement finally meets consequence. They left without a check. I sat on the couch, Rachel quiet beside me. She didn't defend them, didn't scold me, just sat there, the weight of a decade settling between us. Maybe for the first time she saw me. Not the provider, not the placeholder, the man. 1 week before the wedding, Rachel asked again. We were on the back porch. Midday. The sun high, merciless. I was oiling the hinges on the gate. Something no one ever noticed unless it squeaked. She leaned against the frame, arms folded, eyes scanning the horizon like she wanted to look anywhere but at me. You're really not going? She asked. I didn't look up. No. You helped plan it. You paid for half of it. 3/4. I corrected. She hesitated. Trevor didn't mean. I know exactly what he meant. A long pause. Then she said it would mean something if you were there. I looked up slowly, met her eyes. Yeah, it would. Which is why I'm not. She didn't argue, just nodded once like she understood something too late. The following weekend, we drove 2 hours in the opposite direction. Rented a lakeside cabin. Nothing fancy, just wood and water and silence. I brought a tackle box, 2 rods, and a bottle of red I'd been saving since our 10th anniversary. No suits, no photographers, no speeches, just us, and quiet. We lit a fire as the sky turned bruised purple. She handed me a glass of wine. We toasted the flames. To dignity, I said. She clinked her glass against mine. To the man who chose self-respect over applause. And for the first time in months, I exhaled. The cabin didn't have Wi-Fi. No service either. I imagined Charleston full of floral arrangements, stiff toasts, overpriced photographers capturing smiles that would dissolve within the hour. Rachel scrolled once, twice, then set her phone down. We watched the water, said nothing. The quiet was the apology I hadn't realized I needed. When we got back, there was a box on the porch, cream-colored, ribboned, a wedding favor. Inside, sugared almonds in a netted pouch, a glossy photo of Trevor and Sophie mid-spin, and a handwritten card. Thank you for making this possible. No signature, no apology. I dropped it in the trash. Life returned, slowly, like a wound scabbing over. Rachel started planting again. I fixed the shed's roof. We spoke less of the wedding, less of Trevor. There was a gentleness between us. Not reconciliation, not quite, but understanding, like 2 survivors of the same collapse. Then, one afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was Trevor, alone. No Sophie, no polished smile, just him smaller somehow, less sure of his own silhouette. He held a grocery bag. Inside, 2 sodas, a bag of pretzels, and a 6-pack of beer I'd once told him I liked. I didn't say anything. He asked if he could come in. I let him. He sat at the kitchen table like a stranger visiting the scene of a crime. Rachel joined us, quiet, watching. He didn't drink, just sat with his hands folded like a student waiting for punishment. I wanted to say I'm sorry, he began. Not just for the speech, for everything. I said nothing. He continued. I let other people, Sophie, her parents, define what this wedding was, and I treated you like an accessory. A checkbook in a nice jacket. Still, I stayed silent. I thought it was funny. I thought people would laugh and move on. I didn't realize I was laughing at the only person who's ever showed up for me. Rachel's throat tightened, but she didn't speak. Trevor leaned forward. I know I can't undo it. I want you to know that I see it now. Everything. The years. The money. The patience. I finally spoke. Why now? His voice cracked. Because when you weren't at the wedding, I realized how much of it was built on your back, and how hollow it felt without you there. Rachel reached for his hand. He gripped hers tight. I studied him. The boy who had once thrown a baseball too hard, who had flinched at fireworks, who used to knock 3 times before entering any room. and I saw something real. Regret. Not manipulation. Not desperation. Just a man recognizing the father he never thanked. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't stay long. When he left, he hugged Rachel. Then me. Not a quick pat, a real hug. The kind you give when you know what you've broken and don't expect it to be whole again. The door closed. The house stayed quiet for a long time. I sat back down at the table. Rachel poured 2 glasses. "You believe him?" she asked. "I believe he meant it." She nodded. "That's something." "Yeah," I said. "It is. Forgiveness isn't a moment. It's a ration. Measured, not poured." Trevor didn't come back the next day. Or the next week. Took a month before I saw him again. This time, Sophie came with him. She didn't smile the way she used to. That tight, practiced grin. All teeth, no warmth, had softened into something quieter. She brought a casserole. Chicken and rice. Too much salt, not enough soul. But she tried. They didn't ask for anything. We ate in the living room. No speeches. No expectations. Trevor helped clear plates. Sophie asked about work. Not the kind of question people ask to be polite, but the kind where they actually listen. They stayed an hour. Maybe less. On their way out, Sophie turned and said, "Thank you. For everything." That was new. After they left, Rachel stood in the kitchen watching me. "You okay?" she asked. I wiped down the counter. Getting there. And I was. Not healed. But steady. That summer, Trevor came by twice a month. Sometimes with Sophie, sometimes alone. Never asked for a thing. We sat on the porch, talked about things that didn't cost money. Football, the weather, how hard it is to find people who mean what they say. One night, he brought over his old guitar. The cheap one I bought him when he was 13. Scratched, stickers peeling, strings loose. He strummed it while Rachel grilled burgers. And for a moment, the air between us felt like something alive again. He didn't apologize again. And I didn't need him to. Words can't undo years. But behavior can start to mend them. They never asked for money again. Not once. I checked the accounts. I watched for quiet manipulation. But it never came. Sophie picked up extra shifts. Trevor started tutoring high school kids in math. They made do. Not perfectly. Not proudly. But without leaning on me. That mattered. 6 months in, Trevor asked if he could borrow the drill. Not money. Not a favor. Just a tool, something simple, something honest. I showed him how to use it. He listened. He even wrote it down. It was the first time I saw in him a version of manhood that didn't require rescue. Rachel called it progress. I called it balance. And I protected it like a man guarding a wound that finally stopped bleeding. The rules were never spoken, but they were understood. No more asking for handouts. No more pretending jokes don't have weight. No more disappearing until the next emergency. We built something small, fragile, but ours. Still, I never forgot. I never forgot the look on Trevor's face that night in Charleston. The smirk, the raised glass, the silence that followed. I never forgot how Rachel said nothing. How I walked out of that room with a receipt instead of respect. I forgave. But I did not forget. Because forgetting invites repetition. And I would not bleed twice for the same wound. Now, when they visit, we eat together. We talk. And then they leave. No one stays too long. No one lingers in old roles. We are not what we were. And maybe that's okay. The hardest truth I've learned is this. Love without boundaries is servitude. I loved Trevor like a son. Gave like a father. But I did it without drawing lines. Without demanding recognition. I thought sacrifice alone could earn family. I was wrong. Respect is not a gift. It's a gate. And once you let people step over it, they will never stop. So I built a new one. Now, when I sit on the porch, beer in hand, Trevor beside me, quiet, real, I feel something close to peace. Not because everything is fixed, but because everything is finally honest. We are a family again, but only because I stopped pretending we ever were one in the first place. And now I ask you, whoever you are, wherever you're reading this, would you have kept paying? Would you have stood through that dinner, smiled through the laughter, written another check? Or would you have done what I did? Walked away, not from love, but from the lie. Because sometimes the only way to save a family is to stop being the one they stand on. So tell me, was I wrong?